Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about confusion and conformity. It's funny how often those things go hand in hand. And we're going to be talking about specifically in the context of why ML and AI initiatives seem to fail at such an alarming rate, but also why they're failing the business value test. Like, why is it that these really large-scale, ambitious initiatives aren't getting proper estimates? They aren't getting true cost of failure estimates. They're not being tied to the value out the other end. They're not being monitored appropriately like key stakeholders. And so what follows is a conversation I had with Manny Bernabe about this topic, and Manny's really into this area. He is a consultant in the AI space, and I really value his opinion, and I think you guys should listen to what he has to say. And I think at the end of this, you're going to see we sort of reach a breakthrough, and I believe that we have some unique insight here to share with you all. And I also believe that Palantir's ML and AI features fully solve this problem space, in my opinion. So get ready, people, for a conversation about ML and AI initiatives.
You got it, brother. Okay, so for the recording, the question is, why is it that so many AI initiatives are failing the business value test?
Yeah.
And I think it's a function of two things, and maybe this is a good place to start, and we can kind of jump around a little bit.
Yep.
I think number one issue is the lack of confidence and appreciation of AI and ML amongst business managers and executives.
Yeah.
So an executive has to look at something, look at a proposal and say, okay, this is the ROI for this. Okay. It also has to have some appreciation and understanding of the underlying concepts and technologies to ask the right questions.
Right.
And so I think there is sort of, there isn't a great understanding of how AI is going to directly plug into increasing top line or increasing the bottom line for businesses. It's a little bit too fuzzy for executives to make that call. And really, I think a lot of executives see AI as a marketing type of thing where like they have to say that they're doing AI in order for them to say it on their brochures and on their website. But in terms of having direct, like next quarter impact, there's a little bit less clarity there. I think that's problem number one.
Right.
And problem number two is around data science managers, technical leaders, unable to have a business value conversations with executives. This is very uncomfortable for many technical leaders, having been in that situation myself, having been amongst a number of different data science leaders. There's almost like a kind of just a natural aversion to talking to, like, hey, let's talk about how this is going to impact our financial statements in Q1. What does that look like? And usually what happens is it's sort of they fall back on jumping right into the data, trying to model something, set up pipelines. I'll tell you once I have my data store perfect and all the piping set up. I'll tell you that. And when is that going to happen? Oh, 9 months. 9 months. This is what happened. 9 months. Oh, really? All right. Okay. Sounds good. All right. And then they
it's
kind of
just
just
waterfall, right? And it's not even well-planned waterfall. It's like a finger in the air estimate, like maybe 9 months from now you might see the foundational work be done, but there isn't even a real plan behind that.
That's right. And then I think the other part of it as well is that perhaps there just isn't the sufficient infrastructure already in place to quickly make that assertion in a couple of weeks time. I think if you're building a general application, okay, we're going to build it. We kind of know like everything that needs to be built. We build it, we go test it. And then we find out whether or not it's a good idea or not. With AI, you have to wait 6 months to get your training data. Then you have to first build the infrastructure. And then you have to go
smart. They do that. A lot of times they skip that whole phase of like even laying the foundational work, and then they go straight into that.
This goes back to the lack of education among executives. A good executive would say, like, listen, I don't know how AI is going to help us, but we're probably going to need AI in a year. And if I'm thinking a year from today, I'm probably going to need data for the last 12 months. So at least I'll start capturing the data and categorizing it and keep keeping it safe
Right.
to so that when we do get to that point, my data scientist just jumps in and starts doing hypothesis testing, gives them like really good insights, and we at least have like
on a couple things there. It's like there should be like a playbook, like the executive team could draw from that is like, okay, we want to get into ML and AI. Let's go through the steps of getting there, And then like when you get to that final phase where you're actually ready to do some ML initiatives, like shouldn't there be a process by which you do that, like starting with the hypothesis, right? And starting with and tie that to a piece of business value that we're going to try and solve with this initiative and like have that documented somewhere. And then the science can come in underneath that like initiative, so you can start seeing the model iterations, but you can tie it immediately to like, why are we even doing this again? Like, what is the purpose of this? Oh, there it is, and like, I also feel like they're missing governance, like there should be like some stakeholders committee that guide these things, I don't know what your perspective is there. Have you seen any kind of like development of governance bodies or like people, because it's so many people touch, how you were explaining all the people involved in this, like it goes way, because there's like IT and then there's the data engineering, and then there's the ML science and there's the executive sponsorship and it's like operations folks. And it's like, it seems like everyone needs to be involved on some level.
Yes, that is true. And that's also part of the problem, that there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and, it's hard to find one person that owns the entire pipeline, right, and, end to end, like raw data to like output it insights, and like getting to work across different functions. Pretty tricky. Then you have the problem of a data science leader kind of feeling new to the company, because usually it's going to be a new function, whereas right. IT's been around for a long time, OT's been around for a long time, and they're like the new guy, and they also have to like prove themselves and their skepticism. And I just feel like it takes a really strong leader to navigate those early couple of quarters for a new AI function, particularly within a non-software, more established company. It's like, oh man, it's like it's quite the gig.
Yeah, I do find that should be true, and that like if you're a tech company, even a tech startup, you're a small company, maybe you're sub 1,000 employees, you're like a couple hundred people. But if you are a tech company, everyone's fairly well versed in a lot of these challenges, even though they might not know like what's the ideal way to do this. Like I do have a good understanding of a lot of the parts involved, and things they have to put together. Whereas like maybe like other companies who are, maybe they're just in consumer products, or like they're just in doing something that is very non-technical and their IT staff is small. They really need, I think, some way of like, this is the way you should do it,
Yeah, the kind of the framework that I'm still kind of working on and would like to put together is sort of this concept of, before you build anything out, any data pipelines or anything to that effect, you go through an exercise where you take a fairly high level view of where you're trying to be as an organization within 3 years. What does that landscape look like, right? Like if you're an auto manufacturer, you pretty much have to see where Tesla is right now. And you're like, okay, that's where we have to be, right? So I guess we better do FSD, insurance and all that. Okay, cool. Your playbook's pretty much done. That's your North Star. And then you come back and you say, okay, where are we right now with our data and with our people and our infrastructure? Right. And then you say, okay, well, what do we have to do in the next 3 months to get some more information and what we have to test? And then, and only after then you start modeling, digging into data and working on that. And I always say that in parallel to doing that, you're not just testing data and data science models, but you're also testing whether or not it's going to be a viable ROI opportunity for the company, right? Whether or not it makes business sense, whether or not there's value to the end user. Like right. you can test that in some simple way. I recently wrote about this.
I think there are like flow charts, like you could diagram this, and go through the answering process.
You can test that without writing one model say like, okay, well, if we predict when this component is going to fail, let's just say within like a certain probability range, would it be valuable to this end user? You mock up the UI, go put it in front of the user and get some information. 50% of the time, you're going to find that it's not of value and that it's trivial, or it's not that big of a deal. It's like a low stakes kind of thing, or they ignore it anyways, or they don't care about it.
Can do it just as well.
A simple rule. Yeah. Or what you find is like, I just need this like digitized or automated or visualized. I don't need any AI. Like, okay, cool. Well, that just saved me like a ton of cash and time. And also I just get something off the shelf and like, boom, like I've created a ton of value for this person already. And so I think there has to be that kind of thinking where the other problem I think also is, and going back to my earlier point, is there's a lot of misdiagnosing of AI problems. And what I found is 60% of the time, maybe even 70% of the time, you don't have an AI problem. You have either a lack of data problem, so data governance problem. You have an automation problem. You have a digitization problem, or you have a visualization problem. So you either don't have the data, or this needs to be automated. So it's a simple, like, if then kind of thing. They just, the end user just wants a nice visualization. This happens in Industry 4.0 all the time. Like they just need a display.
What you're describing is eerily similar to the digital twin Industry 4.0 movement,
Yes.
And there's so many things like wrapped in that, and then machine learning somehow just becomes this part of that somehow,
And the problem is that if you get hired to stand up an AI team, you're a person with an AI hammer looking for an AI problem.
That's right. And like, so that's really trippy. Like when we look at it that way, it's really like that category is probably bigger problems, like Industry 4.0, digital transformation, like that category of problems is huge, and it's really like the smaller category of problems where machine learning can be useful. And I think more generally, like what companies are trying to solve is like the problem of the data governance and the idea of like the data mart, where I can go and find analytics feeds and put them together and then analyze them, like, and what are the tools that an analyst needs that can go beyond Tableau in that environment, where you have lots of data feeds and you need to bring them together. And like, how do they get unstuck on the problems they have now? And a lot of that is data silos, so it's like you got ERP systems that you can't get into, or like you have, their data lakes are insufficient to be able to like do the analysis you want to do, and that whole distributed systems problem. So it's like, on some level, the whole digital transformation problem is like, just give me access to all my data so I can analyze it effectively,
Right.
Like, with the right visualization tools and the right controls, so that I can like govern that process with it, and that's where that bottleneck comes in, where we bottleneck in engineering all the time, that like hourglass diagram I did.
Yes.
Because that seems to be where we really get bottlenecked in engineering. It's like every time I want another data feed, every time I want to ask another question, I run into that problem. And that's not something you want machine learning, like data scientists solving. That's more like an engineering problem.
Right. Yeah. Those are, I almost think of when the army goes into a particular area, the logistics people go in first, the engineers go in first. Oh, we got to put in a bridge. We got to put in all this. And then the troops come in.
Right.
And I think like data engineering is like that. You have to send in the logistics folks in first, set up the bridges, scout the area, set up the areas.
Exactly.
And then you have your goons, not your goons, but your troops, your guys come in and occupy that. And I feel like we're sending in our troops first, and they're like, exactly. We don't have anywhere to park our tanks. We can't get gasoline here.
Chains. Yeah. So we're going in reverse. I think this, it's like, and getting this mentality into the leadership. I mean, we've been trying for years. I mean, there has been a mantra behind it to say, like, look, you need to worry about data quality and governance first before the machine learning path is a journey. But it does seem like today things have gone really frantic, and like people, even at where I work, like I think we're making baby steps towards the data governance and quality, and like being to have this federated data platform. But we've been running on the machine learning space way before we have any of that together. So even we're guilty of that, and we know we shouldn't be doing that. It's not to say like we're not working on doing our best to ensure quality. It's just that it's not under one holistic system, and like. So you run the risk of like certain initiatives going off the rails for the same exact reasons,
Yeah, I think the best tactic that I've implemented is trying to tie those data governance initiatives to some sort of revenue stream.
Right.
And we can do that, like if you just, provide some additional service to a customer that is reliant on, just data that you're using from that customer, that goes a long way. You've got to tie it to some line of revenue,
Right.
at least initially. It doesn't have to be a lot, but my feeling, that's been, when it's gotten the most attention.
Yeah, yeah, like exactly. And like how do we do that? So it's I mean that isn't that how like a lot of digital transformation initiatives fizzle out is because there's no initiative to which you could like tie it to and it's just like a trend or something, you know?
It's yeah, and there's sort of there's a loss aversion function going on here.
Right.
Like I can give you a 50 cents worth of savings, or I can threaten to take away 25 cents worth of revenue.
Right.
Most companies are going to take, are going to be motivated by the taking away of 25 cents of revenue.
Right. Right.
And so a lot of digital transformation is focused on automation, streamlining things, cutting down costs. That's good. I mean, that's important.
Right.
But in terms of getting executives attention and like
Right.
getting the company uber focused on it, it's gotta drive top line revenue.
And maybe that's why they jumped to the ML stuff initially is because there's more product they feel like they could build or like product comes in and they have a pitch, that involves ML, even though you haven't done the steps to like know if you even have an ML problem, but like maybe that's why that gets more traction is like, oh, well, we can tie revenue to this if we just put the word AI in it, like, and like pretend it's going to be successful or something.
That's right. And I almost think like it's not so much, you're not trying to get at revenue there. You're trying to get at boosting your multiple.
Yep.
And trying to get some of that Tesla multiple action, right? Like if you're Ford, the reason why you don't have the multiple that Tesla has is because you can't do FSD, you can't do Tesla insurance, you're not going to do Dojo, any of that stuff. So, I think executives feel like, well, maybe I can get some of that multiple boost if I can slap AI on it, position us as an AI company. Right. But that falls apart really. I think, it's maybe a short-term boost, but long-term it's going to fall apart when the line items don't start showing up on your financial statements around that AI stuff. Like Tesla's gonna
because to have a successful AI product, it's all about the speed of the feedback loop and how well that feedback loop runs, right? So like if you haven't laid all that foundational work to build the data layer and to build the data pipelines and get a repeatable process that gives you actual insight into what's happening as you iterate on those models, you just never get a good answer, and the models deteriorate really quickly, and you can't deal with the deterioration in production. So I think it's like you got to have this really fast, really good feedback loop that's continually allowing you to keep up with drift and all these other problems that occur.
Right, and it's gotta be directly tied to a core part of the company's future. Right. And think about Amazon, right? Amazon, the recommendation engine was like number one. Netflix. Netflix, they don't exist without that recommendation. Yep. Incidentally, I read a book on the founding of Netflix, and they were trying to figure this out, how do you categorize all the movies that are available? And they wanted to do a Yahoo type of listing where you just clicked into all the categories and you would find the movie you wanted. Right. But who's the founder of Netflix again? Is it?
I forget.
Founder of
I thought there were some people that were co-founders, but I can't remember.
Reed Hastings.
Oh, okay.
He's like, no. You're thinking about it in this antiquated way.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a problem of too much options for people. Yeah. What we need a recommendation engine of sorts. So go work on that. Could be simple, like some sort of a similarity kind of thing.
And heavily in that stuff. That's not even like a complicated solution. No. If you have the data modeled correctly, it's actually really easy to drive that kind of an engine.
Yeah, it's more sort of a strategic, it's like a big strategic decision. It's like a design decision, right? It's like no, it's not. You're not gonna list everything like a library. It's actually, we're going to give you 10 recommendations for you to look at. And then that's how most people are going to consume this stuff.
Yep.
So I think, and when you look at Tesla, they're doing it right. Like every earnings call, they talk about FSD, Robo Taxi, Dojo, and they're like, it's like core to their business is why they're getting the multiple. Yep. And, they're backing it up, and they're going to be able to show actual a line item of new revenue that's coming from FSD. I think this year when they go fully public with it, or at least next year. And to me, that's the playbook. That's how you get traction on these initiatives internally in the right way.
Into the other problem, which is a problem of emulation, where like other engineering teams read about Netflix and they read about Tesla, and then they go to like emulate what they've done, you know?
Right.
And there's something that's just being completely lost in the translation, which is like they developed those solutions purpose built to solve problems for them, for problems they actually had. And there's this thing to it where it's like, you know, I when I was taking piano, the teacher would be like, no, you don't get to improvise on the classical piece until you perfect how to play it. You know, you perfect it, then you get to improvise, you know. But like a lot of the teams are just going straight to improv on top of the system they don't even understand, you know, because they're just emulating this thing because Netflix is really good at publishing their works, you know, and giving you open source tools. And they think they're going to have the same success with that. And I don't understand that for the life of me, because like that just doesn't, you're not solving your own company's problems at that point. You know?
I think that's just human nature. I think, you know, you look at Picasso and everybody wants to think about his blue stage and his cubism. But if you look at 10 years prior, he's doing kind of impressionist work. And then you look 10 years prior, he's like a perfectly trained classical artist. Like Renaissance level type of technique. Over time, he gets to cubism. Right. But he starts by like being like one of those classically trained painters. And I think you're right. Like people want to look at the most recent stuff and what's trending and like, oh, I want to do this. But to your point, the foundations are laid there with your infrastructure. The data is so key. But then I also think the culture of sort of, I would almost call it like a Moneyball culture within the organization.
Yeah, that's right.
Where everybody's like, you know, like Bezos will say like, well, what do the numbers say? Like, are you going to come to me with a conversation? You better come to me with some numbers. Like, right? Like that type of culture needs to be nurtured over time, because then when you start asking for the code for the numbers and you find out that the data is bad, then you're like, oh crap. Like, okay, that's why we have to take care of the data. But those conversations have to be happening every day through the entire organization. And that culture takes time to build.
Well, and like that was a good example with the top-down approach Netflix had of like even their founder is like, you know, this is not the way you solve this problem. You solve it this way, you know, and that goes to that culture of innovation, that culture where they're like continually their engineering processes are measuring success. They're tracking what's going on, you know, and there isn't that like disconnect necessarily between the very top leadership and then the people who are even carrying out the projects. Everyone's aligned, whether through an OKR system or whatever it is. They've got some way to maintain that alignment, you know, from the top all the way down. I think that's also like probably a key driver to the failure is like, you know, there isn't that alignment and they're just letting the engineering teams come up and go build Rube Goldberg machines because it's fun or whatever.
I think you're right. There isn't alignment. If many engineers, if you can't directly tie what you're doing on a week by week basis to like the overall strategic initiatives of the company, you have a problem. And I've seen that play out quite a bit. And everybody's at fault there.
Yeah. I mean, that's not any one person.
It's not. Yeah. I would blame leadership the most. In fact, for not having a good process, or also not really having a good definition of what those strategic goals are as well. That's a failure in leadership. But when I think of culture too, but I think of like the Oakland A's, right? Like the small team, like, you know, they're able to, you know, do something big, but, you know, but that was open to everybody. Like the Boston Red Sox eventually took that up and did some great things with it, but it was open to New York and everybody in the league. But there's something that happened with the Oakland A's, and it's just like personal. It's an individual saying, no, we're going to follow the numbers now. Like, let's start our conversation by looking at the numbers. And I think that, you know, there are a lot of companies still don't like that, and it's very hard for them. And it's going to take time for them to kind of build that muscle up. Yeah. I think that's why you can't rush into it.
The problem you're describing there is very much like, I've heard this described as gravity, like organizational gravity, where like, you have a strategic initiative you know is the right thing to do, and it's where you want to take your company. Like, you have to get there. This is the right way to do it. But you're not there. You don't operate that way day to day currently. You have to change all these ways people operate within your company to align to that vision. And then there's this what's called organizational gravity, which is chasing the current revenue and that's all tied to the old way of working, right? So like,
Right.
so how do you balance this, like that gravitational effect of dragging these initiatives down because you're chasing that revenue you're already making, while like kind of in mid-flight move over to this new way of working, you know? And so part of that's the challenge too, I think.
This is why leadership is so important. It's it's a Jeff Bezos saying, like, I get that this has worked for us, this has worked for us now, and we have to invest this to keep it going for the next quarter. But where am I going to be disrupted in 5 years? That's an Elon Musk kind of question. That's a Reed Hastings kind of question. They're looking ahead in terms of where things are going, not necessarily what things are happening right now. A mentor once, said something to me that the difference between a leader, a manager, and an employee is that an employee worries about what's happened in the past. A manager is worrying about what's happening in the present, optimizing everything that's going on right now. And a leader is worried about what's going to happen in the future. They're kind of looking ahead. And to me, that is sort of the number one distinguishing factor of what a leader's job is. Their job is to look ahead and be strategic in terms of where things are going and how to, use your bully pulpit to push the organization in there, because I call it organizational momentum. You call it gravity. The point is that corporations are designed to optimize. It's just a function of their nature. Like they're like Uber engineering optimization machines. However, like there's a yin yang kind of thing where you always want to be optimizing, but you also want to be searching, right? It's like a deep learning algorithm where like you search, and then you optimize. And the corporations are just too geared towards optimization that they miss the search, they miss the big new opportunity, and then they get massively disrupted by a new company.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're sitting on the fence and you're succumbing to organizational gravity constantly, and you're not making the steps forward to put you, because there's all this foundational work that has to be ready by the time you get to some point 5 years out. And if you haven't done that work, then you start to get disrupted by your competitors who didn't have that problem because maybe they're starting new businesses under a new model. And now you're competing against them. And so it's like, but that's not to say it's too late. Companies often pivot. But like one of the things I find interesting is like, how Palantir will always say, like, we're building the software products that companies don't yet know they need,
Right.
But they can be that augmented partner that's like thinking about these problems and have been for quite a long time, and like coming to them with a whole ecosystem that is designed for a company. It may not solve every specific problem at your company, but it solves like 80 to 90% of the foundational problems that you're going to face. And they knew you needed to work this way before you realized it.
Right.
And so it's like, they're kind of like this, to me, they're like this third party that can come in and be like, no, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have the wheel, we may need to paint it for you, maybe put some chrome on it, but like, we've got the wheel for you, And I think that on some level, that's why I'm so attracted to the platform and have been since day one, is like, oh, finally, we don't get to go around this circle anymore and go through all this pain. There's this company that can just get us way through, all the way through all the bullshit, to where we have like all those problems solved. And now what we need to figure out is like, how do we get our teams aligned? How do we get management aligned through this platform with our teams to start shipping value? Like that's kind of the way I see it with Palantir.
I like that and appreciate that. For me, my focus is on getting executives and leaders to appreciate the benefit of why they need to invest in something like a data platform, like something like Palantir. I think we're right now, the branding and the marketing is too focused on the how and the tooling. Like, oh, you need this tool. Not enough on painting that dream picture of why you might want to invest in this. And so I think that if you're able to convince an executive, like, listen, you can either be Tesla or you can be GM in 5 years, you get to pick. You have to make a decision right now. What do you want to do? And then, okay. And then you want to be Tesla. Okay, cool. What does Tesla do? Great data infrastructure, focus on AI. Perfect. That's what you want, right? Okay, cool. Then the how becomes irrelevant. And then like, okay, well, who does this best? Palantir, awesome. Well, let's just pay them whatever it takes. So there's this Nietzsche quote that I really like, that for any man with a strong enough why, the how is irrelevant.
Right.
And I'm trying to apply, and I'm trying to figure that how to do that in the on the AI side, we're like
Right.
painting such a beautiful rosy picture that they're going to be like, I don't care what it takes, we have to invest in, like, we just have to make this happen.
Let's unpack a couple of things in there because I think that's really, really good points. First one is just like from on the engineering side and the business side, Palantir lacks like total credibility to be that company because no one knows who they are. So like way more people in the YouTube investment community know who Palantir is than engineers know who Palantir is.
Right. Yes, yes, yes.
By an order of magnitude at least, right? So like
Totally. Yes.
that's a big problem. Like you got to solve that problem because when that pressure of like just get it done comes, like just I don't care how you do it, doesn't matter, but we need to do this. Like I don't want the engineer, if the company rushes to adopt alternative solutions because they were there first with the documentation and the platform that you could learn, I think that's going to be really problematic. And that's why I've called out a lot, like the execution risk with Palantir is huge because they have a lot of legwork to do to get known and like appreciated so that people choose them and they build that reputation. That's not to say they're not doing that. And that's not to say that that's deserved even. Like, I don't think that that's deserved because they are such an amazing company. It's not their fault that, well, it kind of is their fault, but it's like, if people just knew more about them, that wouldn't happen. It's not for lack of their work product or like the quality of their work. So that's like problem one. Like, how do they become that company that's like top of mind, or anyone else for that matter, but a particular Palantir? How do they become that product that's top of mind? Oh, they're the leaders in the space. Just buy them.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's like where I keep thinking like the inflection points out there, like 2025. That might even come into 2023 based on like a possible recession. Some of the other things that are actually happening out there today. But because the global pressures of disruption and war and recession could push more companies to want to get into this space faster, especially if they see other people winning. The other part is like, let's unpack the sort of the pressure related to how, and like, or the pressure related to the why. And I haven't heard a really good, like, I don't have a pitch for that, like I could sit down with you and I can talk about all the pain associated with doing it wrong, and we can all point to prototypes like Tesla, right? Or like Netflix and Fang generally. Let's just put that under the umbrella of Fang. We can say, hey, like they've been crushing it, making data-driven decisions. We can point to Harvard Business School studies. But I don't think that really resonates right now. Like, I don't find people listening to me when I make those arguments.
I think we still have to figure out how to do that. And I feel like part of the reason why I like being a content creator is because it allows me to, one, think about these questions, and B, test them.
Right.
So I put them out there and do that. Like if for example, like I had one post where I was talking about IoT, but instead of talking about all like the functionality and the how, I said, listen, IoT, like today you can have a ring on your finger, monitor your sleep. 10 years ago, you had to go into a sleep study lab for overnight with a whole bunch of electrode nodes on you, and it would be maybe like 10% as good as what you can get today.
Right.
So that really resonated with folks, like, oh, cool, I get it. And so for me, as I talk about AI, IoT, I say like, hey, in 5 years, you're going to be able to sell a high margin SaaS service to your customers, and you're going to be able to go directly to them, and you're going to be able to know them better maybe than they do themselves, better than anybody else. Isn't that like any executive would be like, oh shit, that is fuck, I'm selling widgets right now, like I'm selling like a machine right now, and that's super commoditized. It's going to be built in China, India for penny, I can't compete on that. How do I compete on that? Like, oh, high margin data SaaS services. And people and that gets executives like, okay, now I'm listening, tell me more. So it's kind of like it's there's something there. I'm still figuring it out though.
I agree with you on like there's something in that high margin data SaaS services for companies that like fall within that space. But I will caution you on a few things. This would be a good transition. I probably will cut this portion out of the video of it because I'm working on another video that I want to show you because it's relevant. There's three waves I see coming that are going to define the next 5 years, and the problem is like SaaS is one of the ones that I believe is on the chopping block. It says you're sharing. Can I share?
Oh yeah, totally.
See if I can share this thing here. Yeah, that's one of the things we're struggling with right now is SaaS. All right, let me find this thing. Here we go. All right, so can you see my screen?
Yep.
So these three waves, like remove the engineering bottleneck, consolidate SaaS, and decentralize the data warehouse. These are like the three big tech trends that I'm dealing with right now. And removing the engineering bottleneck, you already know this. We've talked about it in this conversation as well. But like this consolidate SaaS, like 70% of an organization's software right now is SaaS. And like the average number of apps is around 80. I think at my company, we have over 200. We have like this giant spreadsheet we maintain for that. And like there's even like SaaS products to manage SaaS now, you know? Like that's how crazy it's gotten,
That's
right?
meta.
Yeah, it's pretty mental, dude. And what that leads to in the user experience is this really like disjointed, dysfunctional experience where like to get to something you want, you often jump through several apps, you know?
Right.
And it's really difficult to navigate. The experience is super clunky. When teams trying to integrate these things, they become distributed systems problems when they probably shouldn't be, because the data should be first party in the first place, you know? So it's like I do see this trend of companies going, wait a minute, how do we get rid of this? Because one, our data should be first party. And two, why are we solving distributed systems problems and creating distributed systems hell and creating a management burden for first party data? Like that should just be under our roof to begin with and have first party integrations rather than these, what's forced on you as a third party integration. So I see that as another way of coming. And the third one is this decentralized the data warehouse, and which is a problem of both autonomy and scale. Like the data due to this point here, right? And these are all related too. The engineering bottleneck, the SaaS overload, and this last point, they're all related. The SaaS problem leads to this issue whereby now to get your data into a central data warehouse, what do you have to do? Well, you have to integrate it, right? And to integrate it, that's a systems integration problem. And
Right.
that problem looks like Mount fucking Everest. And the rate at which you can solve it is like a snail trying to climb the mountain, you know? Because systems integration is hard and it takes time to integrate that data into this other solution you have. Monitor it, keep it up to date, make sure nothing broke when an update was pushed or whatever, you know. So that problem just doesn't go away, and it's also a problem of autonomy. You know, like teams need autonomy to go out and pick whatever solution they want to handle first party data and to publish data streams. They can't be hamstrung by IT telling them like this is the solution you get, you know, this is the way you will do X. So like Martin Fowler in 2021 put out a video, which in this thing, if you see it on my channel, I show a clip from him. But he's basically saying, you know, the new cutting edge work here is being done on what's called the data mesh. And what that is you basically give teams the ability to publish analytics feeds and document those feeds, pull them all together under a platform that can do data governance so you can access those analytics feeds for a specific purpose over a specific period of time. And that's where you'll do like a lot of the machine learning and all these initiatives. But I'm like, you're just describing Foundry, you just don't know it. You know, like that's
Right.
what Foundry does, right? So like to me, things are moving in that direction of Palantir. The industry doesn't know it yet. Like there's all these things that are kind of converge. But I did want to bring up the SaaS point because the high margin SaaS business will be under attack by people who can go first party. And so
And I would say that maybe in software space, in the companies that we all hear about, SaaS, SaaS has been there for a long time.
yep,
But there are many companies, smaller size in other spaces outside of software, where SaaS is a new type of business model for them.
yep,
And so there's going to be a lot of time for that to play itself out. I would even consider things outside of SaaS where it's
yep,
outcome based, for
right,
example. So you could say like, hey, we're just going to give you this output and we guarantee it. And the reason why we can guarantee it is because we have everything monitored. We
right,
can anticipate things. Okay, that's another way. But my broader point is that the business model has to shift. It will shift
yep,
because you have new technologies, and that's and if you want to get that revenue, you want to get that multiple, and you want to survive, and you want to be closer to your customer, then that's why you should be investing in data and right now, so that you can have the option to do more analytics in a year.
I think there's work to be done in that pitch. I feel like that. Yes, this idea about being closer to your customer. Like to give you an example, we just figured out like how we could 100x the business off a non-traditional way of thinking about that data that we just discovered, you know, like,
Perfect.
but
Yes.
like, that's the only way you get that kind of insight, is to be able to collect it, analyze it, find these new business opportunities that you didn't know were there, you know. So there's, I think on some level that there's this idea that that yes, the data is powerful, but you might not even know why yet. You know, it's like you kind of also have to understand it on some level to figure out like why would it be valuable, and how does that turn into new business models you haven't like really explored yet. Um, I don't, but I also think there's something to this idea that in addition to this need to, in my opinion, to own data first party and drive down the number of third parties that deal with first party data, that it really should be first party data should stay first party. The way you share it will probably change as well, more like a Snowflake or a Palantir approach where you share data without replication through a platform. So it goes beyond just the business silo, like what Fowler's talking about with the data mesh, and it expands to multiple businesses that want to share data together.
Right.
And that has some place in the value prop you're talking about. I think it's like the idea of the data mesh that connects a business consortium is more powerful than just a single business that runs its own data silo, you know. But companies aren't warmed up to that idea yet, you know. They like,
Yeah, I think that goes back to the how and
right,
implementation. And my thesis is that if people aren't fully bought in on the why, then you can scream all you want about how and tooling and all that, and it's
right,
just not going to
yeah,
get anywhere. I guess. But my question would be to you is, why not go with Google Analytics? It's a built
yep,
out product. It's not perfect, but
yeah,
it
yeah,
has a ton of integrations to everything, which I don't have to handle. Like,
right.
why would I want to do that in house myself? Even if
So,
the privacy is important, but it
well, the
seems like
first
a lot of
problem is
work.
an engineering problem. The SDK is terrible. So, like when the SDK downloads, it blows up and creates this really poor experience for the user. There's intrusive stuff we don't want on there that Google is doing behind the scenes related to pixel tracking and tracking the demographic breakdowns, which to give, you know, that's not both a privacy concern and a user experience concern, because all that JavaScript and all that stuff they put in there actually slows your site down and adds to problems of having to ship all this stuff over the wire. Now
Mm,
they could solve that engineering problem by moving to a server side model, which I suspect they're already working on. The push from Google itself is to move more server side, so I have a feeling they're going to solve that problem technically. This problem will probably go away. But so first, it's just an engineering problem. The second is a data integration problem, because yeah, Google Analytics out of the box is okay if you don't know anything. I guess if you're like one of the most naive businesses out there, that product meets your needs fully. Most of the time, if you want to do actual science on the data, or you want to really understand your customer and you have a broad enough base to do that, which isn't everyone. I'm not saying like in the SMB market, that might not be what you want. But what I'm saying is that if you want to enrich that data with anything else and you want to actually do some really cool science on that data, you need it first party. It can't be sitting out there in Google's servers. It needs to be brought into HDFS where you can actually do proper analysis on it. And that's
right.
a 150K solution minimum per year, provided you can even do it the way you want to do it, you know?
Right.
And so there's that problem, is that I can't actually analyze it first party, but it's my data. That's just my data. It doesn't belong to Google, man. You know, like
Right.
that's my data. Why is my data over here in this data silo that
Right.
Google runs, and I got to pay 150K a year to get at it? You know, like that's a problem. Sorry, this might. But I
Yep.
think
Yep.
we're onto something here about like the why. You know, why do I want this? Why do I want it? But in that general space, not just in this space, like beyond this thing, but like just in that, how do we get businesses to care about this problem? I think it's that, like, yeah, your data's inaccessible, you know, like that. And that's maybe a large part of the problem, is like a lot of the data you have is just locked away in ERP, or it's locked away in Google Analytics, or it's locked away in this other program over here. And you don't have a way to get at it. You know, no matter what you're doing in the ML initiative space, until you solve that problem, you're hosed, you know?
Yeah, I think maybe now I'm just kind of talking to you. I'm kind of just coming up with ideas. I'm just spitballing here, but maybe the way to frame it is sort of more loss aversion, saying like, "Hey, if you don't take care of your data, you don't do this data integration work, then you're actually losing the ability to compete in the future in a more data rich environment, which we know
Yep.
that's where everything is going." So
Yep.
maybe that's sort of a better angle. Like, don't lose your optionality to
Right.
compete in this new data rich environment, which is only a matter of time for every space. And I would say, like, hey, like GM didn't think they were going to be going up against Tesla 5 years ago. Now, like,
Yeah, no,
Tesla,
that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
like, and I would say,
They
like, don't
would
think
have
like
laughed you
GM.
out of the building if you said that, you know?
Yeah, 5 years ago, no one was thinking about Tesla.
Yeah,
GM, like, they're cozy.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
Tesla's worth more than all the next 7 car companies
yeah,
combined.
yeah.
Right? And who would have thought that would happen in automotive space? So you better
Right.
believe it's going to happen in oil and gas and manufacturing
Oh
and
yeah,
medical
yeah.
devices. Like,
No, I
you got
agree
to
with that.
guarantee it.
Yeah, I think if you look at just the safety improvements that can be made in some of those industries by incorporating AI and ML, like just the insurance costs alone would be enough to convince businesses it's worth investing in. The insurance differentials if you have this stuff versus you don't have it, you know. Especially with predictive analytics, part failure, better driving models that can be driven off the actual person's data of a driver, you know, depending on if they solve privacy issues there. That's like the Wejo model. You know, Wejo is trying to build that kind of a model for insurance and driving. So is Tesla. You know,
Yep.
they're trying to kind of go on that route. So I think those are all good forward-leading indicators of like why you should care. I don't know if it'll get CEOs super scared. I think there's also the excitement level of like it could if they're smart. I guess if you pick the right customer, but then there's also this problem where like you think of all the pain that goes on in a business day to day. Like okay, I'm in product, right, and I use several tools. Maybe I use Heap or I use Amplitude. I have Google Analytics and maybe some other tool that's analyzing all these various different types of data, and I want to bring them all together, and it's really hard. You know,
Right.
like to get my Google Analytics data hooked up with my Heap.io data or whatever else I'm tracking, like, and then the engineering crashlytics, right? That should also go along with that. Like that's no one can do that right now. Like if I asked my teams to do it would take forever. You know, like it's actually really hard to like pump that all into Grafana and like get it all integrated in there and updated daily. And like, and then you don't even know if you have the right analytics capabilities to like look at it in the way you want to, you know.
That,
Something
that
in there, you
that's a
know.
good point. I mean, I think that's fair too. You could say, like, hey, instead of going after the CEOs, go after the
Yeah.
operators, do the
Yeah, I was
Salesforce
thinking about that.
approach.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking about that. Like I thought about that a lot last weekend. I was like, should they be going just after the operators? Because they're the ones facing like forget IT, forget engineering. Like the operators are the ones that are stuck there with that bottleneck every day, you know, and like really trying to find a way to get at what they want to drive engagement or to drive the outcome on the next marketing campaign or whatever. And they're the ones that have the immediate need on a lot of levels, you know. So I think there's
Uh,
something in that as well. Like
uh,
how do you do that?
Uh, I think so too. You know, I just I want to from Palantir. I'd like to see a little bit more. You know, trying different things, different approaches. They have the I think the executive pitch down, and they know how to sell there.
Right.
I'd like to see a concentrated effort like mid tier and operator level,
Right.
and seeing what can they can do there because you know if you can hit each level of the organization in a multi-pronged type of approach, that to
Right.
me is like you can't stop that kind of sale. It's like it's inevitable.
Let's bring it full circle too, because maybe it solves a lot of the problems I complain about related to like the lack of maturity in the ML space, like the reasons all those initiatives are failing, and the emulation problem is like if if you had a entry point of say 50,000 or under, you know, that's not necessarily SMB, but that is the mid market, and you could sign up with a credit card and it's the operator that signs up with a credit card to solve this real problem you have. You have like several prototype cases of this trying to integrate these various analytics tools and things you need to look at to drive engagement or solve marketing problems or sales problems. And you had those prototyped on the site and you just sign up with a credit card. The only bottleneck you might have is connecting your data, which has to be done through like a data connection client that Palantir offers. But assuming they had a channel partner that could just solve that problem, or your own IT department could solve that problem, and you could choose between a self-hosted option or a SaaS option on Palantir's site. And no matter what it costs, you know, anywhere from 50,000 or less to do. And then you only give them like 4 modules. Like you hide everything else and you just give them like Contour, you give them Quiver, you give them like Workshop, you know, and you give them Fusion, which is like an Excel spreadsheet program. And you can let them select what type of prototype cases they have. It'll almost be like Hyper Auto, but like way scaled down. They're not going to see any of the pipelines. They're not going to see any of the ontology stuff. That all just gets baked based on your use case. And the dumbest way to do it is that they just bring in the source data and show it to you exactly how it is in there. And you can just work off the source data. But if you have like a prototype domain, like I'm in product and I want to analyze use cases in Google Analytics and Heap.io, if they had software defined data integrations for those, then it's like you're signed up and within an hour, maybe you're doing something in there that's useful, or maybe it's in a few days after you get the data connection client installed. But then the operator's unblocked, at that point, like the operator no longer needs to go back to IT and ask for an integration. Like everything's integrated. You're looking at it in Foundry inside like Contour or Fusion. And then what's interesting about that is that you no longer are worried about data science. You're just actually getting the business value immediately out of these better reports that you can generate off the global features and doing like advanced segmentation and stuff like that. And I think that's where Palantir's driven a lot of value for like the US government is in that capability, right? Like getting those operators empowered with data that's actually governed correctly and they can look at it, So maybe that's the way they and the way that solves the ML problem is, like I said, you don't need ML, like there's a lot of value in that.
A ton of, I can't tell you how many times I've been brought into a shop saying we need AI. Like, no, right. You need like a good data reporting mechanism. Right. You need like your weekly reports. And it goes to, again, those are the first steps in building that culture. Like, even if I can turn on ML for you tomorrow, you're not going to do anything with it because you're not going to trust it. You're not going to know how to use it. You don't know what's going on underneath the hood. Right. You can't grow into that. But I like what you're saying. I think I how would I frame it? I would think like almost like let's take like a market segment and let's measure their time to first executive report from the time that they start the onboarding process. Right. And I would say like, okay, how cheaply can we make this? Like if we can do it like under $50K, $25K, how fast can we do the integration? And then the next milestone would be like, how long before they get some sort of like roll up report to an executive where like they're pulling different data streams together. They're doing some transformation and they have like a nice little write-up. And it's something that's of some value to a leader or a manager. Right. That if you can optimize, I think that's, you can optimize for that. And if you can get some traction there, that to me is like, that's the game changer.
That to me is too. I feel like we could write this down as like an article on Medium, like the playbook, where it's like, even if you don't even have to put Palantir in there necessarily, but I would just because I think they're the only platform that really does it, but you could list a few platforms that could do that. But so instead of businesses going about the way they have, no, here's your playbook. The first is time to first executive decision from the data, and like you go through the operator level. You need a very easy point of entry to integrate these disparate systems so you can see your data in a unified way. Start getting value out of it right now today. That's an agile process, right? Like that's a really quick iteration that starts delivering value. That's a lot like agile software development. Then you can take the next step, which might be integrating more and more of that data, and getting all of that put together. And then you start getting like real data governance going, like people within your organization can decide who can see what, for what reasons. You start getting smart about security, and that can all, if that's all baked into the platform, then you're off and running even further, and then you can start maybe looking at like, what are more advanced modeling we can do,
Right.
And maybe that includes some ML and AI initiatives, but what's cool is they would already be enhancing the value of the data that's being delivered today,
Right.
So again, it's just agile. That becomes like agile software, and that might be the playbook, dude. Like that's how we should write this down in like a Medium post, and like you could even turn it into a book, I bet, Like if you had examples of doing this with like Palantir, like or some other and other platforms, like that's the way businesses should be approaching this problem, because there's immediate value to be like tapped by doing that.
I like it. How about I take a first stab at it, put together an outline, send you a Google link, and we'll just kind of go back and forth on the Google link.
It's on. I'm probably going to publish this to the channel if you don't mind. I'll tee it up and do an intro and outro, but if that's cool.
No, feel free.
Sweet, dude. Awesome conversation, Manny. I was like, I need to because I saw your post and I was like, he's dealing with the same stuff I am right now. He's looking at these same issues, and I'm like, I got to talk to him about like what he's dealing with and going through it. So it's like, yeah, this is good, man.
My view is it's a marketing problem, and it's beholden. It's on us AI machine learning professionals to help people appreciate and help them understand why this is so necessary. I think there's a lot of like, at least in my space, there's a lot of like, oh, why don't these executives get it? Why don't management companies do it? And I'm like, that's our fault. Like, why aren't we better persuaders?
Exactly.
And like,
that's the way I feel about it too. It's like, why aren't we better at persuading people? And why aren't we better at like presenting something that adds value? And then we should be better at that, you know?
And you know what I think it is, Dory, or Coach, I guess.
That's fine.
You know what I think it is? I think it's a smart person problem.
Right.
Where like you're like, oh, I get everything. Why doesn't everybody just see it how I see it? And you know, if I give people the facts, right, like they're just gonna make the right decision. Like, no, like you need the facts, but then you also need persuasion, and you need marketing, and you need to, you know, frame things in the right way and convince people. Because you know, like humans, like if you look at history, humans typically do not make the decisions based on facts. Like they're not completely rational people, especially in big groups.
I agree. No, I 100% agree with that. It's like, and that's what it is. It's like, if you're a smart technical person, you have a vision of where you think you could empower the business with this technology. You just see it, right? But like, you can't communicate it to everyone, and you can't present it in a way that convinces people to let go of doing things the way they do them today. That's just because you're not presenting a compelling enough vision.
That's right.
In my opinion. And that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means like you haven't found a way to convince the other people to share in that vision. You know,
100%, man. And that's what was driving me is like, I gotta find a good way to get this message out, and that's on me. I'm gonna keep trying. I'm gonna keep putting this stuff out, and I appreciate your engagement on LinkedIn and tell me what's resonating.
Absolutely, man. Cool. I'm gonna get out of here. I'll let you get out of here. If you can send me a link.